Welcome to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I'm Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz, the Mavericks season is over. It's man,
What a ride.
just let it have a. Can we have a moment of silence for the Mavericks, real quick? Okay, Shahnavaz, it's the off season, so let's break it down. The Mavericks they made the final two teams, and you heard it with Nico's comments. You know, they played disappointing in the finals, but if you look at the whole playoff run, it was a special season. It was a success. He wants to keep the Mavericks championship aspirations sustained on this team. So in this episode, we're going to recap the season, and we're going to do a report card. You know, we've done that previously a few times this season, so now it's the whole totality of the season on each player and Jason Kidd. So that should be an interesting one as well. And then we will end it with Nico's comments in the end of season press conference. So Shahnavaz, the Mavericks lose to the Boston Celtics 4-1. Best team in the league, dominated in all facets of the game. But if you look at the whole playoff run, I mean, you beat the Clippers, you beat the Thunder, and you beat the Timberwolves, all 50-win teams. You know, they played really well in those 3 rounds, specifically on defense. They were really great at defense, and, you know, the emergence of Lively. I mean, we all knew how good he was in the regular season, but you know, now at a national audience, everyone knows how good Lively is. He's just 20 years old. But what do you take away from the playoffs? What do you take away from the season with this Mavericks team who bounced back last season? They didn't even make the play-in, so now they make the finals. What's your take on the season?
I mean, I don't think the only way it gets better is if you win the finals. You know, I mean, just winning the conference. I mean, you know, we've talked about this extensively. Like, I don't think we both had the Mavs finishing as like a play-in team, you know, coming into the year.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to give credit, obviously, to Nico Harrison for kind of identifying what this team was lacking, what you couldn't get done in the offseason last year, and correcting that, you know, basically course correcting at the trade deadline and bringing in, you know, PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and that completely changed the trajectory of the team. Look, say what you will about the performance in the finals, but, you know, like you said, the Mavericks beat 3 50-win teams. They beat 3 top 4 seeds in the Western Conference to get to the finals. You know, and their defense actually in the finals wasn't all bad outside of game 1. You know, they held Boston to, you know, a pretty, you know, terrible shooting series. You know, it's just Boston just had more firepower, and Boston's been this team's been building this for 7 years. You know, this is almost a decade's worth of kind of, you know, the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum era, and plugging in the right pieces and kind of figuring out what works. You know, Boston's made the finals before. They've had to course correct, much like the Mavericks did. So Boston was the best team all year. They statistically speaking, they're one of the best teams in like the last 20 years. So, you know, I think Dallas just ran into a team that was more prepared, was you know, prepared from the sense of like they've been there, right? Outside of Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris, you know, nobody on this team had been to the finals. Versus Boston, you've got, you know, guys like Drew Holiday who's won it before. Tatum and Brown have been there before. You know, Al Horford's been in the league for 20-something years. You know, he's been through the ringer. I mean, you know, it's just that team has been building this for such a long time, and it's just unfortunate that Dallas kind of ran into that. And you know now what you've got to do to fix it. You know, the West isn't getting any easier, but if you look at the totality of the season, I mean, there's nothing you can say that other than that this season was a rousing success from where this team was just a few months ago. To be able to get through the Western Conference and make the finals is an unbelievable achievement for this team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this was, I wouldn't say overachievement with this. When I, you know, because you reach the finals and they you know surpassed the expectations. But you know, when I look at this team from the trade deadline, they were one of the top teams. So you know, it's it's a very rewarding to see this team come together in the short fashion that they did. Um, but it's also reassuring that not only that Luca and Kyrie can play together, that also PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford can perform on winning teams. You look at Derrick Jones Jr. He can be a not only a rotation player, but he's shown he could be a starter on a contending team. And Lively, he surpassed his expectations as well. He can be a starter. He can be, six man. He can be anything that you want him to be on this team as well. So, and then Jason Kidd, he's shown that he can bring together different personalities and bring together different players and make it coexist. He's a players coach. He's not only a players coach, he's a former player. So, he knows how to he knows what the players are going through and he knows how to resolve it. So I look at this season as obviously they're setting the bar high,
Hmm.
because now, like you said, the building block after this is winning a championship. Like, what do you, how do you sustain what you just did? So now it's all on Nico in the offseason. Not only, seeing what's out there for this team, but you have to see how can your players get better, even better, even
Yeah.
starting with the top of Luca, or starting with the top of Kyrie, and the role players. Can they go, and Nico said it, 10, 15% better? Um, because they are in a salary cap crunch, where they have a lot of players making a lot of money. Obviously, you want to bring back Derrick Jones Jr., but we'll get into Nico's comments with that. But just from where they're at with their core, they're all relatively young outside of Kyrie and Maxey, who played in playoffs. You could mention THJ and Powell, but we aren't going to mention them because we looking at who played the game. So in the playoffs when it mattered, and it's very promising feature of your team because you also have that core, but then you have Omax coming in as well who could get some of those Maxi minutes. So, or he can get some of that THJ minutes. He's a 3, he's a 4 type of player. So I think what you saw this season was growth, obviously, but now you set the bar high. So that's what really boils down to. You have to sustain that. You have to not only bring back your core players, but you also have to get a top 3 seed. Now the expectations are there.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to people's arena, they're gonna bring their A game because you made the finals and you have star players and you have role players who are going to bring it. You can't take a night off when you play the Mavericks. And I think this was a big stepping stone. I think they skipped a few steps. Like
Hmm.
we thought they would grow gradually. Like we thought next season would
Yeah.
be a type of contending season after a couple moves, but they obviously did it early. So the the state of the team is promising.
Yeah. And I think in some ways, right, it's good for Luca as well to have to go through this
Mm,
and be put through put through what he went through in that finals, just, not even just the finals, just the playoffs in general. I mean, the beating that he took from teams, and you could tell at the end he was worn down. It was very
yeah.
clear that he was doing everything he could to keep the Mavericks afloat. And look, you can talk about the poor showing from Kyrie Irving in Boston, but PJ Washington didn't play up to his standards. Derrick Jones Jr. didn't play up to his standards. Really it was Luca and Derek Lively played, obviously very well. And um, I think for Luca, it's kind of to understand the grind of making it to the finals, what it takes from a conditioning
Hmm.
perspective, from a health management perspective. That's something he needs. I think everyone forgets that he's 25 years old. Like, it's kind of crazy. We think, and the fact that he's been in the league this long and has accomplished the things that he's already accomplished, you would assume he's 28, 29, but he's, one of
Yeah.
the youngest players, one of the youngest superstars in the league. And, LeBron had to lose, one before he won, before he ended up winning in Miami. Jordan didn't win his first till he was 27. So there's still plenty of time. Luka's going to get multiple championships. But I feel like sometimes it's good to go through this because it really puts things in perspective for a young player and a young superstar to understand what it takes to get to the finals. And, now he knows what it takes to get there. And he's got to take that and learn from it to get to the point where he knows what it takes to win the finals. And I think it's a good experience for all these young players. Like you said, the Mavericks are, outside of Kyrie Irving, an incredibly young team that doesn't have a lot of postseason experience, especially in the finals. And so if they can keep this core together, everyone grows, and to have your superstar go through something like this, learn from it, come back next year, better than ever.
Yep. All right, Shahnavaz, let's get to the report cards.
Let's do it.
This is one of my favorite segments. I know it's one of yours for our podcast, but let's start, with the easy ones. Let's start with AJ Lawson.
Incomplete. I mean, I don't think we saw a lot of AJ Lawson. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of AJ Lawson with the number of wings this team has, going and the obvious need of another wing, upgrade in the offseason. So, I like AJ Lawson as a player. I think he's got a future in the NBA. I just don't know if it's with the Mavericks.
Okay. I agree with you. I mean, I haven't seen enough of him. Shout out to him, playing his first real NBA minutes. He, even when he was a two-way player, I mean, you're still getting your opportunity, but he was upgraded to a main roster player. So that's one of his goals of, his career. And he got minutes in the playoffs, in the finals. I mean, obviously, at the end of games, but how many people get that opportunity? So even if he's not on the team next year, congrats to him on his stepping stones in his basketball career. So, but for that, I could give it an A plus. I mean, but we're actually talking about what they did for the Mavericks. So I would say incomplete. Another guy who could be incomplete too. Omax.
Yeah.
What's your thought on him?
Definitely incomplete. I mean, I don't think we saw enough. I think the injury definitely set him back a little bit. We saw him obviously in the finals towards the end of games, but Omax is a really intriguing guy. I think you brought it up earlier that, it's a guy that could potentially take Maxi's minutes if Maxi's not on the team next year. And I know we'll do an off-season episode and look at that stuff, but Omax is a really intriguing guy. I think there wasn't a lot of, not a lot of hoopla coming out of college, for him, even though he was a late first-round pick. But he's got that Dorian Finney-Smith build. The defense is there. It's if he can get a consistent jumper going, which I know he's worked on. You look at some of his stats with the legends and some of the highlights. I mean, he's played outstanding. I just think he's got to get some meaningful minutes, and I think that could come next year. I think it's tough when you're a rookie, and outside of a guy like Derek Lively, or any of these top picks, like you're really not going to be a contributor on a playoff team, much less a finals team. As a rookie. Yeah. Which says a lot about Derek Lively and how skilled he is at 19 or 20 years old. But I think Omax has got to put in the work over the offseason. And, I think Dallas can look in the building if you're looking at another wing coming off the bench and you've got to shed salary with a guy like Maxey. I think Omax gives you a lot of the same skill set that Maxey does. Just he's got to get a consistent jumper going, because I don't think we saw enough of that this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say incomplete on Omax. I mean, he has a promising future with the Mavericks. Hopefully with the Mavericks, you never know what trades are coming, especially now that the Mavericks are trying to contend. But I would keep Omax. I would get a great look at him next season for rotation minutes. Like you said, Maxey, you see that you need Maxey, in a stretch five type scheme. But at the same time, you're relying on him too much in the regular season. So you got to use guys like Omax. Hopefully he has a great offseason. Nico said that he is going to play in the summer league. So that will be a great test to see exactly, because that would be a great test to see him against actual, prospects that are coming out of the draft, top picks. You're not just playing G League guys. You're playing top picks in the draft. Obviously, it's a lower draft, but still, you're playing not only top picks in the draft, you're also playing against guys who are in Omax shoes where, you're a first rounder, you're a second rounder on a main roster who's coming back to play to show that, to prove that they are a mainstay on an NBA roster as well. So it'll be great to see Omax feature like he was with the Legends, like you mentioned. His improvements on the shots, his improvements on isolation, offense. Obviously, his defense is sustained because he is a good defender. He's very lengthy, like you said with Dorian Finney-Smith. I like that comparison, but I think his offense has more potential. Obviously, he's very young, but I think he can be a 3/4 type player, a small ball four. He could be like PJ Washington.
Yeah.
If you really give him the opportunity next season. So I think you obviously saw Maxey break down. You're relying on him so much. Hopefully you can, use Omax in the second lineup. Depends on how the offseason goes. But like you said, even if you have to, worst case scenario, or not even worst case scenario, if you're getting back a great player, if you have to trade Maxey, you can get Omax, you could have Omax take that next step. And that's what the Spurs do.
Yep.
Obviously not now, but that's how they got success. You use guys, role players. Obviously you keep the stars, but you use role players until they hit their 30s, and then you replace them with a young role player. So that's what the Mavericks should really be doing if they want to sustain, success with having two stars who make a lot of money. But and Derek Lively in a few years is going to make a lot of money as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully the salary cap keeps going up until then. But yeah, I'll say incomplete for now. All right, Shahnavaz, Dwight Powell.
Look, I'll give Dwight Powell a B, man. I think he came in, he knew his role. You want to talk about the unnecessary hatred he got last year for starting, as being your starting center. When the whole Christian Wood, it's so funny to think back. This Mavs team last year. I was talking to a buddy of mine. I'm like, man, we were so excited about Christian Wood, and here we are a year later, and we were in the finals. It's just it's crazy. But
even people were excited about Grant Williams too.
Yeah, it seems like so long ago.
Not even last year, but yeah.
And getting Seth back, it was we're coming into the season. We're like, all right, But Dwight, look, I'll give Dwight a B, man. Dwight took less money to stay with Dallas. He's got a good relationship with Luka. He's got a good relationship with the front office and with Coach Kidd. And he knew his role, he was the third big off the bench. He'd play garbage time. I mean, when Lively was out, he would have, obviously he played in that Minnesota series, that one game that Derek Lively missed. But again, you need guys at the end of the bench that, can come in garbage time, that can be, kind of these injury replacements, but really just character guys. Dwight Powell, say what you will about, his game as as a basketball player, but character-wise, I mean, he's one of the best in the NBA, and I think everybody can attest to that. And he's a great teammate, and obviously a really smart guy. So I'll give him a B for knowing his role and just being a part of the team and not putting up any fight to get playing time.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't play that much. He's obviously an emergency big. He's the third string, like you mentioned. I'll give him a C+. I wasn't floored by his game when he did play, but all the positives that you mentioned, he knew his role. He was a good teammate, and he's really a spokesman for the team when they have things that they need a player to do. And also, I mean, he did okay. I mean, 3-3, high percentage, but it was at the end of games most of the season. So I would say C+. I mean, that's not bad.
No, not at all.
So I would say C+. He did his job. Let's see. Let's go with Jaden Hardy.
Oh boy, that's a hard one.
I'm going to give Jaden Hardy a C. I think, and it's fluctuated throughout the year. I think there's times where it was an A, I think there's times it was an F. So let's just put him right in the middle and give him a C.
Yeah.
One of those things where, especially with the way that Tim Hardaway Jr. was struggling, like Jaden Hardy had a real opportunity to take a hold of that first guy off the bench, that scorer off the bench. And he didn't. I think there were some games he kind of showed flashes of it. Obviously Kidd, trusting him in the OKC series, was huge. I think it was a big confidence boost for him, and he played well in his minutes. But I think you're starting to see some of the limitations in his game from I think he's a good passer. Obviously, he's a streaky shooter, but I think the ball handling needs work. And obviously, he's worked with Kyrie Irving on that. Some of the decision making isn't there. And the Mavericks are going to have a real conversation about what his future is going forward, I think, because this is a team now that is going to be fighting to get back to the finals. This isn't just let's make the playoffs. Now that you're here, you've got to get back, and you've got to be able to surround Luka and Kyrie with pieces that fit that timeline. And so the real question is going to be, is Jaden Hardy a part of that? Or is it better off utilizing him to get maybe another veteran ball handler that kind of fits what the Mavericks are trying to do? It's going to be really interesting, but I think it's fluctuated a lot for me over the year. You and I have talked about it a lot. His game, I'll put him right in the middle of the C. I don't think it weigh. I think he's kind of, some good, some bad.
Yeah, I give him a C plus. At the, like you said, the first two report cards we did was the F for me with Jaden Hardy.
Yeah.
Just going off of last season comparative to how he played. And then, he started turning it around at the end of the season, and then in the playoffs, he did okay. He wasn't outstanding, but he also didn't play where you're like, get him off the floor. You're like, he's actually doing okay. So I'll give him a C plus. He did what he was supposed to do. And I think you brought up a great point with, the deep and hard conversations with him, because not just him, but his role, because he's a tweener. He's not a point guard. He's not really a shooting guard. He's like a combo guard. And that's one of the hardest positions to be in as a young player, because you really want your role defined. And, and it's not like he's a Clarkson or, those type of vets who are, they know they're going to score it, and they know how to get their shots, and they know how to get points no matter what. If they're having a bad game, they will get to the free throw line, stuff like that. So, he's still growing, and that's the tough part, because I want to keep Jaden Hardy. I want to see him develop his game even more on a good team. Last year they were losing, so he played really good. This year it's really up and down. Like you said, the range was really up and down. And, next year, like you mentioned, I agree with you. I mean, they're going to be contending just from what you saw in the promise of this team. And they're not all a veteran team like their team a couple of years ago when they made a run. Like, this is a young team. So where does he fit? Because you could say the Mavericks still need a third creator. They still need a third guy.
Absolutely.
I mean, Exum can't be that guy all season. You need a type of player like Tyus Jones, or you need a third guy, even Dinwiddie. You need a guy who knows how to get their spots.
Yeah.
And
Bruce
I don't
Brown.
know if they had exactly. I don't know if they had the time to, develop him. Like, he's a guard and he needs minutes, but you have Kyrie and Luka. So you just need a guy behind those two that knows what to do on a nightly basis. If you want to contend. So that's going to be tough. Like you mentioned, it's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting what they do with him in the offseason. Do they keep him? Do they package him in a deal with another player like THJ? Who knows? I honestly would like to see him play another summer league. And that's wild to say, because you're like, okay, he actually played in the playoffs and he had the role. Let's sit him out like Lively. No, I want to see him develop it even more. It's either he has to be a creator or he has to be a scorer, but he's a combo guard, and that's tough as a young player behind one player in the world, and then another top 20 player in the league, and they're both guards. So
yeah,
that's tough.
and his value may be he may be more valuable to another team. I mean, Nico's going to have to look
get
at that.
minutes. Yeah,
like he's got to play. I mean, it's hard to improve your game if you're not playing.
He dominates when he goes to the G League, so it's like he's kind of stuck.
It may be more suitable for him on a rebuilding team as opposed to a contender. I mean, it's just this is going to be a really interesting offseason because it's now that nobody expected the Mavs to be here, so now you've got to really take a hard look at your roster and say, okay, how do we get back to where we were? And you've got to Nico's got to have those hard conversations with some of these younger players and look at what is it going to take. What are the biggest needs for this team? After looking at the loss to Boston, and how do you fix that? And if it means parting ways with a guy like Jaden Hardy, I think you have to do it. You can't be sitting back and waiting on that development to happen when he's not going to be getting viable minutes in a playoff rotation.
Yeah, I think the tough part about his game is he's kind of a scorer, but he doesn't score a lot.
Yeah,
and that's the problem is he can pass okay, he can score okay, but he got better at defending, but he's still not a good defender. So it's like you still want him to develop, but like you said, what's out there? Like if another team says, okay, we'll buy THJ's expiring contract, but you have to give us Hardy. That's like you have to have those conversations of, do you see him a part of the core like you mentioned, or do you see is he a sweetener in a deal where a rebuilding team with a lot of cap space can take on Hardaway and they want Hardy to give him minutes?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's do Dante Exum.
A B? I mean, look, Dante Exum was the Mavericks aren't in the finals or in the playoffs, much less without him. I mean, the way he played, throughout the regular season, as kind of that filler for some of the injuries, and I think that injury really, really affected him towards the end of the year when he got hurt.
Yeah.
And I think you could see that it wasn't. I don't know if it was just he wasn't fully healed or if the conditioning just wasn't there, but. I thought Exum played well for not being in the league for the last few years and coming back and knocking down almost 50% of his threes and being kind of that additional ball handler off the bench. I think again, this goes back to what we said earlier with Luka. I think not really understanding the length of the season, right, and the grind, especially within the playoffs, I think got to Dante Exum a little bit as well. And he hasn't played in the league in a few years, so it's expected. It's going to be interesting again to see because we've talked about another ball. I don't think Dante Exum's going anywhere. I think he can be kind of that plug and play guy that, he can play the guard spot. He can be, kind of a small three if you need him to be.
Yep.
So I think he's definitely going to be on the team next year. I don't have any doubts about that. I'm just curious as to what the playing time is going to look like. And that's going to depend on the moves Dallas makes in the offseason. But I think for coming back from overseas into the NBA and the way that he played, especially that Rockets game, that was a crazy thriller. I'll give him a B, man. It's hard to come back overseas and really make an impact like he did.
Yeah, I give him a B minus. He had portions of the season where you thought he was the third guy. You thought he was the third playmaker. Some parts of the season you thought he was a starter. So I think just looking on the totality of the season, I'll give him a B minus because he was injured. And then also there were times where he was playing very timid where, after injury, which makes sense, because you don't want to get injured again right before playoffs.
Yeah.
But, even in the playoffs, I thought he did decent. Like he was decent. So I wouldn't give him anything lower than a B minus, but I thought there could have been more with him, because you still, like you said, he has fluidity where he can be a point guard, shooting guard, or small forward, which you need with the Mavericks team. with a 6'8" point guard, or Kyrie as well. In his style, he's a defender. He plays 94 feet, like he guards 94 feet. You need that type of guy. But I think he's in a similar situation as Maxey. I think if you bring him back, which, like, I agree with you, there's 100%, like 100% you have to bring him back. You need a guy like him on the team, especially after the season that they just had. You shouldn't have a whole overhaul of the roster.
Right. Right.
You should just tinker with the roster. But like, with Dante, I think you should play him like Maxey. I think they both should be the third string emergency guy. So you can use him in the end of the season, or you can use him in the second half of the season, where you're where you're getting that positioning of the Western Conference, because he was just like Maxey. He did really well, and then he gets injured, and then they're injured most of the season, or half the season, and you can't rely on those guys to be solid rotation, part of your top 8, because with injuries, I think they should be third string. And I think that's not a diss or an insult. They just made the finals. They should be a top 5 team coming into the season next season. So I think you need to have him as a third string, and I think he would be a great he would be a great player to be on the bottom of your roster. He can obviously plug and play, like you just mentioned. So I think he's a great asset to the team. Keep him around, and he's still relatively young. So keep him around. All right, Shahnavaz, Markieff Morris.
A. Markieff gets an A. I don't care how much you play that. You need guys like that. Guy who's been. To be that champion off the bench. A guy who's played with Kyrie, especially, has a really good relationship with him. It just there's nothing. As much as I dislike his brother, Markieff it definitely gets an A just for being that guy off the bench that I think every team needs. That you need that veteran presence off the bench who's been there, who's done it, who's got good relationships with folks on the team. I think the Mavs definitely should bring him back, and he's a good, like you said, emergency kind of guy. I mean, we saw him play a lot at the end of games, but I think just his basketball knowledge and the way he's always cheering on teammates and kind of talking in the huddles, and the relationship he's got with Kyrie, I think, is critical. So I'll give him an A. Doesn't matter what he did on the court. I think the off the court stuff is a lot more important.
Yeah, I give him a A+.
Ooh.
That's rare, and it has nothing to do with basketball. No. I mean, he's still, when you look at him, you would think he's about to hit 40, but he's 34. I mean, he can still play when he plays, but he was a captain of this team. Like, you have Luka and Kyrie, but he was neck and neck with those two guys as the captain of this team. And you just mentioned it. He was standing up during games as much as Jason Kidd. Like, he obviously, this is no disrespect, but he is a player coach for this team. Like, he was the voice in the locker room after losing. He was the voice of the huddles. He was the voice in Luka's ear, in Kyrie's ear. Like, Kyrie respects him so much, where he's getting advice from Markieff during games. Like, Markieff would bring him over to the sideline to tell him stuff. Like, and he does that just as much as the whole roster. So he's really a player coach on this team, and he's kind of like the Udonis Haslem of this team. As much as the Heat loved him in the latter of his career, that's what he's really doing for the Mavericks. And I'm honestly not even joking, but Nico said Derrick Jones Jr. is priority 1A, 1B. Markieff is 1C.
Yeah,
just because if you lose that type of player, you're losing a big voice in the locker room. You're using a big voice during games. And, like, if he's the 15th man for the next 3 seasons, let it be, because he can still play when he does play. And, he was like wearing Kyrie's shoes during playoffs as a stand. During the finals as a stand to him against Boston. Derek Jones was as well. But he had like you said, his connections to the coaches, to the players, but also the coaches as well. So I give him an A plus because people do not see the behind the scenes. And even Jason Kidd mentioned if there was an MVP for this team, it wouldn't be Luka or Kyrie, which everyone would expect. It would be Markieff Morris, and that's huge. That's huge. What you expect from this team, how good they were after the trade deadline. You would say, "Oh, Luka, Kyrie, or maybe even PJ." I mean, he's been vocal on the court for the team. No, it's Markieff Morris. So I think he's been really beneficial for the team as much off the court as Luka and Kyrie were on the court.
Definitely.
Okay, Shahnavaz, let's get spicy just a little bit.
Let's do it.
Tim Hardaway Jr.
Oy. I'm gonna go D+, and I'll say that because it's on F because the Mavericks aren't where they are without him and his contributions in the regular season, especially when Kyrie was injured. But the Mavericks desperately needed him in the finals, and he was unplayable. I think he completely lost confidence in himself. Some of the shots he was taking were just egregious. Hitting the side of the backboard. I mean, really not. He was passing the ball better, I think, as the season went on, but I think you could tell the writing was on the wall that he wasn't happy with his role. And I think that goes back to the beginning of the year, right? Because his role was kind of undefined. It was, is he going to be the sixth man? Is he going to be starting? Like, what does it look like? And he had some moments in the regular season, but the Mavericks definitely could have used him, and he was a no-show to the point where you couldn't even play him. Outside of that blowout, game 4. D+. You can who knows the status of any other player on this team, but I think you can say with complete certainty that Tim Hardaway Jr. is not going to be back with the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, this is tough because with the playoffs, that's really where you make your money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where the regular season you can say, oh yeah, you're showing your game, but playoffs is where, okay, these players are the players I need to play to win games. And he was, like you said, he played 14 games, but like out of the whole playoffs, but he only had 2 good games.
Yeah.
One was like a blowout against the Celtics, and then one was actually a really good game against the Thunder. But the other 12 were not good. And not only that, like, he's frustrated. Like, I watch him warming up, and when he's missing, like, he's frustrated. Like, he really wanted to be a part of this run. And that's where, I know that he wants a defined role. I know that he wants, the shots. I know he wants the minutes. But it can't be with the Mavericks if they want to contend.
Yeah.
And I think it's run its course with the Mavericks. I mean, he's been here 6 years. I mean, it's run its course, and I think it's time where he can, obviously it's time where the Mavericks need to trade him because the Mavericks need money to pay Derek Jones Jr.
Yeah.
They can't pay him just $3 million. They need to pay him, like around $10 million. So the only way you do it is trade in THJ. So I think my grade for him, and I'm going to say this, he did help the Mavericks when they had injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was playing really well when they had injuries. Him and Luka in Exum, they were keeping the Mavs afloat. So I would say C-. And that's people are probably going to be like, what? It should be an F, or it should be somewhere in the D range like yours. But I think we're talking totality of the season.
That's fair.
And I think, the first few months, we thought this was back to a few years ago, THJ, and I think that goes into my consideration for grading. So I give him a C minus. But obviously the second half of the season and then playoffs, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think had he been that Tim Hardaway Jr. that we'd seen in years prior, I think this season probably turns out a little bit different. Maybe Dallas is a top 4 seed instead of the 5th seed. Maybe they win, a game or two in Boston. He's actually playable and is able to be on the court, but
because they needed his threes.
They needed him, yeah, and
he wasn't shooting them. He wasn't making them.
Yeah, the offense just sputtered, outside of Luka in the finals, and the Mavericks definitely could have used him, and it's unfortunate because he's a guy that can provide that spark off the bench, as a guy who could very well win a 6th Man of the Year award,
that's how good he was.
Yeah, he very
People
well
were
could
thinking
win.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he was in consideration at the beginning of the year. It was like neck and neck with him and Malik Monk, and he just kind of fell off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a confidence thing. It's not easy when your dad is out in the media, talking about how you should be playing and all that. Just a lot of distractions, and I know a lot of Mavs fans will be happy when he's off the team. And look, Dallas has tried to trade him the last few years. They just haven't been able to get anything of value, and at this point, really the value is just getting him off, whether it's for a 2nd round pick or not. I mean, it's really just getting somebody who's got cap space and letting them absorb his contract, whether it's Detroit or the Pelicans or, teams that have wanted him in the past. I'm sure Nico's going to cook up something to make it work for the finances.
Yeah. And I'll leave it with this, his role was a 3-point shooter. That's his strength. And he's very streaky at that. Like games, he'll make 1, and then next game he'll make 4. So he's very streaky. The Mavericks need someone consistent. I think the Mavericks would rather have a 3-point shooter who makes 2 every single game than one who makes 0 one game and then 5 the next game.
Yeah.
So they need more consistency there, and they need a 6-man who's multifaceted, like in their game, like not just a 3-point shooter, but can dribble or can defend. Like you got to have more than one strength. And I think for cap issues, I mean, he's the one that it has to take the bullet. So Maxi Kleber,
man, C minus. Maxi is one of those players. I want him to succeed so bad because I really like him and I really like the way he plays. I think the injury really, really hurt. I don't think he was healthy. And I think Dallas really could have used him against Boston had he been healthy. But man, I don't know what happened to his shooting. Like he was such a reliable guy from outside. The defense was there. We saw it against Minnesota. Or before he got hurt, it just, the shooting just regressed so much this year. It was, and he was hurt last year too. I think it's just been a kind of a rolling, year and a half of him being perpetually injured. And so I don't think we've seen the, a really fully healthy Maxi Kleber in almost 2 years. But the way he's been shooting now, his contract's kind of, he's up there getting $11-12 million, and he's up there in age. Like, I don't know if he's another guy that, you probably got to look to move. If you've got Omax in the building who kind of offers you the same skill set, or you bring in a younger, more versatile guy who can knock down shots a little bit better, that's something that you're going to have to look at. But, I really had high hopes for Maxi because I know he's been a valuable contributor in the past. But I just think with the way he's shooting the ball, there's no confidence there. There's no touch, on his shots anymore. It's bad. He's regressed to the point where I don't even think, you can play him anymore.
Yeah, I say I was gonna give him a D plus, but I say C minus. Just for outside of the finals, I thought he was okay. Obviously he was injured, but just for the totality of the season, very disappointing. And that's where I was leaning towards D plus. But like he he just did okay. Like he wasn't
Yeah.
bad. He wasn't good, but he just did okay. His shooting touch was here and there, and I think it was just like THJ. Um, I think he's run his course with the Mavs, but obviously they like him, and he's a guy that can play stretch out five. So and power forward. So I say C minus, and I think he should be like Exum. I think he should be the third string. I think they need him. But if there's a better deal out there, I think you have to make the move, especially with Nico running basketball operations now.
Yeah.
With no input from Mark Cuban, he's going straight to Patrick Dumont, but he said it. Dumont's not in the weeds, so I think Nico's a guy who's going to make the move to improve the team. So if
Yeah.
there's a move out there, I think you make it. But I think he's a good third string guy, and I think you can lean on him, but not as much as they've done.
I just don't know if you can pay your third string guy $11-12 million. That's that's the only part for me. It's like if he's going to be your third guy, you should be making what Dwight's making, like $4 million a year. Like you can't be paying him double digits, to have him ride the bench the whole year.
And that's absolutely facts. But what are they getting back? So that's the thing. You can't just trade him just for a salary dump because you're going to depend on Omax to play 20 minutes of the whole regular season and playoffs. We have to see what he does.
No.
And that's the thing. He could struggle, and then you have to go back to Maxey. So
that's true.
It's going to be interesting offseason. And also I think having the same roster, I don't think Nico should do overhaul when you just make the finals and panic. Oh, the Thunder got Caruso. Oh, another team is making moves. You also got to bring some continuity to a team because that's been the problem with Luka's era. Every single season he has a different team.
Yeah, I think this is the first time where you can legitimately say the Mavericks are going to go into the next year with the same starting five that they finished the year out with. Right? There's always been moves every offseason to kind of revamp things, or you lose a Jalen Brunson, or you trade a Porzingis. You're absolutely right. This is going to be the first offseason where really you just have to make minor tweaks. Add a player here or there, but bring the core back.
Exactly, because that's how other teams win. They've been together for a few years. Okay, let's do Josh Green.
C minus. Josh Green, again, one of the most polarizing players on the Mavs. I think very similarly to Jaden Hardy. Like he had his opportunities to seize the moment, and it seemed like some nights he was and some nights he wasn't. I will say I was very impressed with him in the playoffs. I thought he played exceptionally well in the postseason. Towards the end of the year, I was kind of souring on him, and if you would have asked me a few months ago, I probably would have said a D. But I think not C minus. I'll give him a C, maybe C plus. I think his playoff performance really kind of, I don't know if it was a light switch that went off for him or what it was, but I thought he was exceptional all postseason against every opponent. And I think he could be a valuable guy, off the bench for the Mavericks next year. Again, his extension's kicking in. That's money that, is that something that, to your point, it's continuity, right? Josh Green's a guy that you drafted. He's been with the team for 4 years. Do you want? He's a very, very, I think, solid bench player. If you bring him off, as like your 7th, 8th guy, a guy who can hustle. We saw him start to knock down that corner three. He's been driving in the paint more. I really, really like what I saw, in the postseason. I just hope it carries over for him. But I'll give him a C plus. I think the postseason performance really kind of shifted my mindset on that.
Yeah, I give him a B minus.
Wow.
And that's big because our first quarter of the season I had a F.
Yeah.
For Josh Green, and the reason I give him a B minus is what you just said, the playoffs. I mean, I was going to give him a C plus, but the playoffs put him in the same grading for me as Dante Exum. A B minus. I think for the totality of the season with Josh Green, he started off kind of disappointing. I mean, he got the extension. You thought he was going to take a next step. You thought he was going to play like he did in the playoffs in the last part of the season. At the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
I want to see this version of Josh Green every night. I mean, obviously you're going to have bad nights, but like consistently. This is what Josh Green is supposed to be. He's with no disrespect, he's a watered down Alex Caruso. Like he's supposed to be the hustle guy. He's supposed to make threes and he's supposed to play tough defense. And that's what he did in the postseason. I want him to take the next step and guard, the best players. And, he also got better at fighting through screens. That was one of his weaknesses.
Yeah.
So this postseason, he played really well. I mean, he shot 39% from the three. He hustled a lot. I want to see him take the next step. I want to see him as a Alex Caruso type player. Maybe he not make the all defensive team, but I want to see him, just play like he did in the postseason, and he will be that guy that they gave the extension to. So that's why I gave him a B minus. I give him an A for the postseason, but the regular season was a C. So that's why I go through a B minus, because the postseason was special. And I agree with you. I think he's like a seventh, eighth man on a contending team. He just goes in there, hustles, play defense, and make threes.
Yeah.
And that's all you got to do. I want to see that during the regular season.
I think he's like New York's version of Josh Hart. That's kind of what he can be for the Mavericks, right? Like and
I think that's what his goal should be. Josh Hart and Alex Caruso, like those type of guys are Mr. Hustle for the league. And I think he can take a next step. He's still young, very young.
Oh yeah.
But like you said, that contract's kicking in, so like he's got to do this every night.
Yep.
Okay, let's do Derek Lively.
Oh, A+. I don't even know if there needs to be anything said. Derek Lively is going to be the third best player on this team. He might already be the third best player on this team at such a young age. The only thing, I mean, we saw him hit that three against Boston. That was, was unbelievable. The form was beautiful. I mean, if he can start knocking those down, watch out, because that guy. And for all this talk about the rumor mill and the Mavericks have a guy in Derek Lively that they can trade, he's not going anywhere. There's no way. You put him on top of the list with untouchables next to Luka and Kyrie. Like that guy's not going anywhere for a long time.
Agree with you. There's not much to say. A+. He changed the dynamic of this team. They've been waiting for a big like him for years, and we've only seen 40%, 50% of his game.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the threes. Even though Nico and Jason said, eventually you'll see that, but he has a role with this team. His defense, rim running, short roll, passing, and finishing at the rim.
He's an exceptional passer for how young he is. I'm like blown away.
But he can pass even more. Like like his game, we're really not seeing his game. Like you go back to high school, but you can go back to AAU, but like he can shoot. He can really shoot. And I think eventually, a couple of years from now, you'll see some more attempts next season, but I think eventually you'll see more of his game as years go on. Kind of like Bam Adebayo. Obviously, he's more mid-range, but I think you'll see more Lively as the years go on. He can shoot. He can dribble for his size. He can really dribble.
Yeah.
We don't see that. He got the Euro step, and he got the post moves. He can do the dream shake. Like he can show. Like I think Mavs. Nico said it. Next season, if he has a small on him, I think they're going to give the ball more to him to post up. I think you're going to see year by year more of his game. It's going to be phenomenal.
I'm so excited.
Phenomenal. A+. I agree with you on that. Let's do his counterpart, Daniel Gafford.
Yeah, B-. I think it's always hard when you're coming over from a new team, especially playing in that. I don't even know if you can call the Wizards a basketball team anymore. But playing for them, it's hard, right? When you're just perpetually losing all the time. And I think he gave the Mavericks the center that he needed. Again, we've talked, he's very similar to Derek Lively. I think Lively is probably more athletic. And as he grows, he'll become better than Daniel. Yeah. But Gafford, I mean, the blocks, the intensity, the attitude, I think that, that fires the team up. Obviously he's a great rim runner. I think kind of got outplayed in the postseason, but that's going to happen against Boston, who plays 5 out, and we know how bad the Mavs struggle against 5 out teams, but played really well, throughout the rest of the postseason. So I give him a B minus. I'm excited to see kind of, what that dynamic looks like next year. Is it going to be, do they keep it the same with Gafford starting and Lively off the bench? Do you flip that? And, I think both of them playing like 25, 28 minutes a game each. I really like, the balancing act you have with having both of them, come in and out and sub for each other. I think it adds a really, really nice dynamic, and it keeps them fresh too. Right? Neither of them are having to play 40 minutes a night, so it really keeps them fresh, and they're pretty much the same player. So I give him a B minus. I thought he was great.
Yeah, and he's only a few years older than Lively. I give him a B. I thought he was he exceeded his expectations for me, and he did his job. I think next season I think this is the time to flip it now that Lively has experience. I think they play the same minutes.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think Lively plays 25. I think Gafford played 20. I think they should play the same minutes. And he's also a big that, Lively can't play a whole season. We saw it at Duke, or we saw it with the Mavs. I mean, he will have some injuries. He's not used to playing these long each level he goes, he plays more games. So I think he's not used to playing a whole season. His body's not used to it. I think we'll see him get stronger.
Yeah.
I think we'll see him get better, obviously, but just going to Gafford, he's so solid, and that's why they started him, because he has experience. I think that's the only reason, because I think they're similar. Like you said, I think Lively's a better passer, and I think Gafford's a better blocker. Defends the rim better. Obviously, Lively is on his way to match that. But, I think Gafford is a solid guy. I think he's just another big that you need. You need two bigs, because, like I said, you can't, put Gafford in a trade,
right,
and then all of a sudden you're relying on Lively's health for a whole season, including playoffs. So I think Gafford was really good at what he did, and I think he'll get better at defending guards on the perimeter. I think it just takes time to improve, because he is 25. He has time to improve his game on the perimeter. He's never been asked to defend perimeter guys like that. So I think he gets a B for what he does. He's a very special. I think he's probably the best backup big, and he's probably middle of the range type center starting big. So I think the Mavericks have two bigs that are very special and a strength of their team. Let's go Derek Jones Jr.
I don't know if there's career year. The shooting fell off, obviously, in the postseason, but again, that happened for a lot of players on this team that just don't have the experience. But if you're talking totality of the year, I don't think you can go anything lower than an A with Derek Jones Jr. It seems like he's finally found a home. The hope is that Dallas can re-sign him. But he deserves every penny he's going to get this offseason.
Yeah, I was going to give him a B plus, but this is a team that went to the finals. I think, and that's why you haven't seen or heard me give a player an F or anything.
Yeah.
I think I'll give him an A minus for what he's done for the Mavericks. He's a solid player. For his defense, he's defended the best perimeter guy every single night, and his attitude in a good way. That he brings to the team. He said it, he fears no one. Every time you ask him a question about the other team, he does not care. And I like that. He'll tell you, he only cares about his teammates and getting a win. And I think you need a guy like that. I think he's still young. He's like 27. So we still haven't seen the best of him, but he's improved his dribbling. He's improved his 3-point shooting. He's improved his defense, even though he's a defensive guy. Like, we saw a lot of dunks from him previous teams. now you're seeing the whole repertoire of his game with the Mavericks. And I think they gave him confidence. He can be a bench guy, or I mean, he could be, you know, a seventh guy on the team, or he can be a starter. And I think that's what's great about him, because he does not care. When the Jason Kidd brought him to the bench for like 10 games, he brought the same attitude. He didn't pout. He was like, whatever it takes to win. And I think that, and he was doing that on a expiring contract. So keep him around.
Yes, 100%.
He has the mindset. And his kind of counterpart, a defensive twin, PJ Washington.
I'm gonna stick with an A there. PJ, I know PJ was your boy, the one, the guy you wanted, for the Mavericks to get. I think he fits in seamlessly with this team. I think the attitude, the intensity that he brings, standing on business against the Clippers, hit some huge shots against the Thunder. Again, regressed a little bit against Boston, but so did the whole team. But I think defensively he was outstanding, better than I thought he was going to be, better than most people thought he was going to be, I think. And offensively, he's got some things to work on. Kind of the out of the break threes as opposed to the corner threes, and those top of the key shots, I think can improve a little bit more. But he's super young. He's on a really good contract. I think he's going to be a valuable piece, as that third, probably not third, but maybe that fourth or fifth guy, in the starting lineup for the Mavs that you can really rely on. He can give you 10 one night, he can give you 40 the next, who knows, but he's going to be consistent. He's got a really nice floater game. And defensively is exactly what you need.
Yeah, I give him the same as Derek Jones Jr. I give him an A-. Same reasons, honestly. He brought the attitude to the team. He brought, he doesn't back down. He protects the stars. I mean, you've seen him protect Luka many times. And that's what you need from guys like him on a team. And I think defensively, it's everything you could want in a player. He defends the best wing or best forward. So I think just from what you've seen with him, his fluidity, he can play small forward, he can play power forward, and a tiny bit of five if you have to. But I think just we have not seen the best of him offensively, and that makes sense. I mean, he came here to just focus on defense at first, and then you slowly start to see his offensive game grow, and just the confidence, and that takes a lot next to Luka and Kyrie when you start to see where you get your spots. And I think that's the next step for him. Even Nico said it. He could average a few more points, like we've said on the podcast. He could average, 16 points next season. And I think that's easily doable. Just make another three or a couple threes, get better at the 3-point range. And I think he'll constantly get work at that. But you saw him take over the Thunder series. And that was because they had to go to him because they were doubling Kyrie. So, just like that, those type of moments shows that he's built for the moment, just like Lively. He's built for these moments, and I think he's like he's the fourth. He could be the fourth best player on a contending team like the Mavericks, but he's able to be the third guy if they have to. Exactly. Where they have other guys step up, like Lively even more, or you have another creator, just a collective of a team. But I think the sky's the limit. He turns 26 next month or in a couple months, so we still haven't seen the best of him, and I think he's a guy that can grow alongside of Luka.
Definitely.
Okay, so the last two, Kyrie Irving.
I'll give him a B+. I think parts of the season was an A. I think parts were, obviously he was hurt, and he did struggle a little bit, but you talk about what he did in the second half of games. You talk about some of the, when Luka was struggling, Kyrie really taking over the Denver shot, that little left-handed floater is going to live in infamy forever. His game against, the Clippers and the Thunder and the Wolves, Luka and Kyrie both scoring 36 in that game, in that closeout game against Minnesota was awesome. But then, you saw the struggles in Boston. So I think B+ for Kyrie. I mean, I wouldn't have expected it. I don't think anybody expected them to work this well together and to make the finals this year. And they just built on it. And his attitude and the way he's embraced the city of Dallas, and the way the city of Dallas has embraced him, really feels like he's at home and he's at peace. And I think to go through a loss like this, and he said it, right, collectively as a team, like they haven't been together that long. Now you get a full off season. You've gone through the loss together. You regroup. You come back stronger than ever next year.
Yeah, I was thinking this is tough for Kyrie because I'm going to give him an A. And the reason I was thinking lower, but just the totality of what he brought to this team. And this is not just basketball. It's leadership.
Yeah.
And that's why I give him an A as well. Obviously he struggled against Boston and he was injured during the season, but from the trade deadline on, with the new team, the totality of, what he's done for the whole season. I mean, he almost had a 50, 40, 90 season. It was just some free throws?
Yeah, I think he missed it by a couple of percentage points, right?
Yeah, so that's one facet. And then the first 3 rounds, the Clippers series and the Timberwolves series, he was really good.
He was outstanding, yeah.
He was outstanding. The Thunder series, he was doubled every time. That was their scheme to make Luka and the others beat them. But I give him an A for what he's done with Luka.
Yeah.
That's the real key. We talked about it. They're the polar opposites, and that's why they get along so well. He's always the peace. And that's what's funny, because a lot of national media put him out to be a villain these last couple of years.
Yep.
And he's been the total opposite. He's not only shown it, people have actually accepted it now that he is the piece of the Mavericks. Because, when you see Luka, and this is no disrespect, when you see him going at the refs, or, Luka shows his passion. Like he expresses it in a different way than Kyrie. And that's why they work so well, because he balances Luka out.
Yeah.
And I think he balances the whole team out. He keeps them calm within the storm. And I think that's why he gets along, and that's why he's so close to Jason Kidd. They're the same type of player, and same type of person. And Jason Kidd's coaching aspects and features model around being peaceful within a chaos moment. And I think that's Kyrie's mantra, is wisdom, leadership, and then also experience. He brought championship experience to this team, and he led them during the postseason. Even when he had bad games against the Thunder or wasn't shooting a lot, or Boston, they were leaning on him because he would lead huddles, just like Markieff. He would lead the pregame. He would tell everyone, hey, let's just play our game. He would tell them what they needed to hear.
Right.
And that's why they were so calm. That's why you saw young players rise to the moment, because they weren't nervous. Kyrie made sure they weren't nervous. He would play with them, play around with them in practice or shoot around just to make them loose. And then when it was serious, he would give them peaceful inspiration. So I think I give him an A for what he's done with this team. And not only that, like you said, this is, just the beginning of a continuity, a continuation of this team, this core. So I think you're going to see him lead this team for, a handful of years. Okay, last one before we go to Jason Kidd in the last word. Luka Doncic.
How many pluses can I add next to the A? The best season of his career, arguably the best season in Mavericks history, top 3 MVP finish, led the playoffs in like every meaningful statistic. He's the second best player in the world. Might be the first. You can make an argument for it. I won't fight you whichever way you lean on that one. But it's top 2 for sure. I don't know what else you can say. I'll say it again. I think losing in the finals, I think, should help. I want to see what the work that he puts in the offseason. And even Nico Harrison said we even need Luka to be 10-15% better coming into next year, you know? So I hope he takes it. I hope he, whether it's the conditioning, whether it's, the demeanor, which again, it seems like we talk about every year, but it's gotten better. It just sometimes still kind of comes out. But, the fact that he's only 25, he is not even in his prime yet. And that should terrify the rest of the NBA.
I agree with you. There's not a lot to be said. A+. Luka, I mean, from what he did, top 3 finish MVP. His stats have never been done before in the regular season, and he like you said, he led the playoffs in all categories except a few, like blocks and stuff that he shouldn't be leading in anyways. And I think just his growth, like you mentioned, he's 25. He's only going to get better. And I want everyone to stop, national media stop talking about his defense, because they did not talk about Jokic's defense when he's the best player.
Steph's
I think
defense,
Steph's defense a few years ago, or like around 2016 when he was top of his game. I think, I think you can't expect Luka to be an all defensive player. I think he has improved in isolation and post defense. The stats show, the eye test shows it. But the next step is easy for him. And I think it's transition defense, because that's simply because he complains to the refs.
Yeah.
Like if he just gets back like Jokic does, because Jokic is pissed with the refs, but he just gets back.
Yeah.
I think if you wait for timeouts, we talked about this. If you wait for timeouts to talk about the refs, that would make his transition defense much better. And also the help defense, I don't think he'll get that better at help defense. It's just not part of his game. But like isolation and post defense, I mean, that's all you can ask for with him. But the transition defense is the real key. I think just getting back, and then timeout, or if there's a foul or stoppage of play, go to the refs. I don't care about that. Go to the refs all you want. So I think, but A+ for everything he's done. I mean, outstanding. Just he's only going to get better, like you said, conditioning and complaining to the refs. I mean, that's like the only weaknesses.
That's it. Yeah,
that's it. And if that's the only weakness, something that is easily attainable, I mean,
watch out.
Watch out.
Watch out.
Just imagine 5 years from now when we talk about his career, it's going to be crazy. Okay. So last person, and then we'll do last word on Nico's press. Jason Kidd
made the finals. You got to give him an A. And I think he improved throughout the year. A lot of stuff that we were, upset about, from his after timeout management to some of the rotations. I mean, he stopped playing Tim Hardaway Jr. He gave, Dante Exum more minutes. He gave Jan Hardy more minutes. He made the finals. Like, you can't blame a coach, and I'm not, people on social media get so mad when I defend him. I'm not defending Jason Kidd. I'm not saying he's the greatest coach in the history of the NBA or the greatest coach in the NBA currently, but the fact of the matter is he's good, right? He's made the Western Conference Finals 2 out of 3 years. He's made the finals in one of those years. And he's got great relationships with the players. He's a player's coach. That's what the players want. That's what Luka and Kyrie are going to get, Yeah. And with the roster that he's got, he's made the conference finals two different rosters. He's made the conference finals twice in 3 years. Bad coaches can't do that. So I think he made the finals. He gets an A in my book.
Yeah, I give him an A. And that's just, I don't even have to go into, you said it. He's improved. He's shown it. You reach the finals, you get an A. If he won a championship, I would have gave him an A+. But from what he's done, and that's just facts. I mean, a couple of years ago, I gave him an A- for his whole season. The Western Conference Finals run.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, I gave him an F.
Yeah.
I talked about how bad he was, and I honestly don't think he liked that roster, but he was still not coaching. And then this year is an A. I mean, for all he's done, he has the roster he wants. He has the players, the personalities. And he's got better. He's done what we wanted to see. He started lively at the beginning of the season. He got better at his rotations, and he got better at after timeouts, his play calling, and also just bringing the team together. He never weathered the storm when they were in losing streaks.
Mm-hmm.
He was always kept it. He's like Kyrie. He keeps it calm within the storm, and he keeps it calm when they win. So he's a player's coach. He gets along with all the players that on this team, and I think that's growth. I mean, even players that lead the team, Jalen Brunson credits him.
Yep.
He wants players to grow and get paid. So obviously, he puts people in position to succeed, like Derrick Jones Jr. He did Josh Green when Carlisle didn't play him. He gave him an even bigger role. It got a big extension, and I think that's what it really boils down to is he's good at developing and then also being a player's coach. So I give him an A, and I'm excited to see what he does next year. I mean, even if he don't make the finals, I want to see him, do the same things and keep building this core that he has, the players that he likes.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Shahnavaz, last word. So Nico had an end of season press conference just going over the course of the season and not only the playoffs and also the future. With the offseason, some of the big highlights from that was he said, they had a disappointing finals, but he was happy for the success that they had throughout the playoffs and just after trade deadline. And then also he highlighted that, I asked him about what needs to improve when it comes to roster construction. And he said the top, he said he believes they have the players already. He said each player has to get better internally. But also the top 7, he doesn't see anything changing with the top 7 or 8 players that played in the playoffs. And then when you look at the minutes, that's Luka, Kyrie, PJ, Derrick Jones Jr., Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford. The 7th is Josh Green, and the 8th is Maxi Kleber. So you expect something, he said 7 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that just shows you that he's looking to tinker with the roster but keep the same core. So that's special to see, especially making the finals, and they're all young. You want them to stay together. And then the last thing, the money aspect. He said they don't. He said he's going to spend all the money he has. He's going to exhaust all options. He said he hasn't even had. They don't even have money conversations with the new owners. Patrick Dumont and the Adelson family. They don't even have conversations on money. They want to win, but in the right way. They're not going to be like the Suns, go get a Bradley Bill when it doesn't make sense. So I think that was right. Why he said in the right way.
Yep.
But from those aspects of the press conference, he talked about a lot, like Luka. He expects Luka to play in the summer with Slovenia. He talked about other things, but what do you get from his press conference from the topics I mentioned, and what stood out the most, and what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what stood out the most is really the sole ownership now he's got of basketball operations, and I think for the longest time there hasn't been that. Even dating back to Donnie's,
Dumont won't be in the weeds. He runs the show.
Yeah, I think even dating back to Donnie, right? I mean, you're talking about all the free agency mishaps that the Mavericks have had over the last 20 years, where it's like, well, Cuban wants this guy, but Donnie wants this guy, and Bob Voulgaris wants this guy, and Carlisle didn't want this.
Carlisle,
all these things that kind of meddle together, and now it's like Nico can be GM. Nico can do what Nico does, and we saw it this year. He made Grant Williams signing didn't work. Boom, I'm going to pivot and go get something that does. I think I love that, because I think meddling owners, we see with the Cowboys. Look at what Jerry Jones has done to the Cowboys, right? We've seen it with the Mavs, in past off season. So I'm really excited to see this is kind of the first off season ever where Nico is going to be able to do what he wants without having, somebody overlooking his shoulder saying, I don't know about that. And then the second part is the money. And I know there's a salary cap, but we know that Mark Cuban has been very frugal with respect to paying the luxury tax. And um, sometimes that's beneficial, but then sometimes it's not. You look at a team like Golden State, who's paid $600 million in luxury tax penalties, but has numerous titles, this decade to show for it. Cuban's net worth is 5.4. The Adelson family is worth 33 billion. So you're talking about, almost $30 billion difference in terms of net worth. So money's definitely not an object. I don't, this whole second apron, issue is going to be really interesting to see because the Mavericks have to kind of shed some salary to get, to fit in Derek Jones's contract. There's also a situation where, Landon, if you're the Mavericks and you've got an opportunity to make a trade for, a wing that potentially could start, what does that contract for Derek Jones Jr. look like then? If you're able to package guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, potentially, and bring back a wing player, does Derek Jones sign for less to come off the bench? Does he go try to get his bag up? It's going to be interesting to see, but I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about is Nico having full autonomy and being able to really do what he does as a GM. And we've seen the successes. He's had some misses, obviously, with the JaVale McGee signing last year, but we've seen successes. We've seen him make moves in the draft last year. We've seen him make moves at the deadline. So now that he's going to have the full ability to do what he wants to do, it's going to be a really, really exciting offseason.
Yeah, and I think you when you make a finals, you have to bring back as many players as you can to have continuity and to also sustain every single thing you can, because this team has only been together 5 months, and if you get a whole training camp, you get a whole preseason, you get a whole just first half of the season, I think you're going to see this team get even better because you're going to see PJ Washington find his groove offensively, especially in preseason, just testing out things alongside Luka and Kyrie. They probably won't play that much in preseason, but just testing out things at the beginning of the regular season. His offensive game, and then Lively as well. Post moves, take 1-3 every other game or every few games. Just each player, like you said, and like Nico mentioned, just get better, 10%, but 15% better. But at the same time, if it makes your team better, you have to make the move. Yeah. So, and that's Nico's mantra. And if it takes a Jeremy Grant, you got to make the move to get your team better, because not only do the Mavs have to sustain the success that they had last year, I'm not talking about accomplishments like reaching the finals. I'm saying sustain the success. Just, be a top 4 seed and have home court in playoffs. So, stuff like that. And then just see what happens in the playoffs. Because you have Nuggets coming back. You have the Thunder already making moves, and you have the Timberwolves are going to come back. So you gotta sustain the level that they are, and get better internally. But if there's an opportunity outside, bring it as well, because you need all the talent you can get. And it's about chemistry, but it's also about talent in this league. So, from what Nico said, I think that was what stuck out most to me as well. But just also, just that dynamic between, it's kind of tough, because he also says it's like a corporate mindset now, a corporate mentality. With Cuban, he had a lot of strengths on being like a family, being like a basketball mindset when it comes to front office, like a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But like you said, there's flaws to that as well. So now it's all on Nico Harrison. Like, you're putting the target on your back, but I think he likes that.
Yeah.
I think he wants to be the only chef in the kitchen. Obviously, Michael Finley, and then the assistant GM, and then Jason Kidd. He'll have people around him, but he's making the decision. And Dumont is not in the weeds. So I think, that is the the thing that stands out most, and then also keeping the top 7, 8. We'll see what he does to bring back Derrick Jones. I think Derrick Jones wants to. He said it. He wants to stay here. Obviously,
Yeah.
he loves it here. And the Mavs love him. The fans love him. The media. I like him a lot. But I think he finally wants a home.
Yeah,
He's
definitely.
bounced around the league.
Moved a lot. Yeah.
He's had like 4 teams, 5 teams, and he's only 27. Like,
Yeah.
I think he wants a team he can stay for at least 4 or 5 years just in a row. Until you hit your 30s, and then you can just get the best contract. I think this is his prime. I think I want to see him, grow as a player as well. I want to see him develop. And that's the luxury with him. He can be a starter or a bench guy, and he doesn't have a problem. He said that with an expiring contract. Imagine him getting a contract, but I think like you said, does he take a pay cut? It depends what Nico does.
Yeah.
If he trades THJ just for a salary dump, like they can pay Derrick Jones Jr. as much as he wants it. That's reasonable. But like you said, if they trade THJ and Josh Green or Jaden Hardy or Maxey, like where they're bringing back another starter.
Yeah.
How much
gives you more depth? I mean, you can bring Derrick Jones off the bench. It's going to be interesting
but like you said, it's money. Like, would he come back for a $6.5 million per year?
Well, and the other thing they could do, the Mavericks wouldn't be able to pay him this year, but they could come to an agreement, much like Milwaukee did with Bobby Portis, where it's kind of like a 1-and-1. You take less salary this year, and then next year, when the Mavericks get off more salary, then you kind of agree to another extension next year. So there's some under the table kind of dealings that you can do from that perspective as kind of like a handshake agreement, like, hey, sign this smaller deal now, and then next year decline your player option, or we'll decline the team option, and then give you a bigger contract. So there's different ways to work around it.
And I think that's what I just think he wants a home in the league, because he just personally, from seeing him behind the scenes and seeing him on the court, like I personally, just the interactions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're here to get paid.
Yeah,
but I think like you said, I think there might be a Nico dynamic where there's a difference. Like there's more, like you feel a different vibe with Nico than you feel with Don Nelson. Like I like Donnie. I don't think you could. I think if this was Donnie Nelson, I think Derrick Jones would have to go get his bag wherever it is. But I feel like there's a sense of core that you're building with Dallas that you want to stay in place. So like you said, there's options with Derrick Jones where you'll get your money either now or maybe next year. But you want to stay here because I think he wants a team. I don't think he would want to go to, let's just be honest, like the Wizards for $12 million a year, where you can be with the Mavericks for either $10 million if they trade Hardaway in the salary dump, or maybe, like you said, there's options here. I think he would take a pay cut, and I don't know him from a financial portion, just saying what's up in the hallways in press conference, but like I think there's a sense of him wanting to be somewhere for 4 or 5 years, just building his game where you just focus on winning, where you're not saying, what role do I have? Because other teams use them differently. Like, he has a role on this team.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that matters, right? And I it's going to be interesting to see how that contract plays out, because a lot of it's dependent on, what salary the Mavs can shed.
Yep. All right. So we appreciate y'all tuning in for this end of season recap. Next week, we got the draft. We got free agency to talk about. Oh, do the Mavericks make a trade from now to then? Like, there's so many things that could go on in the next couple of weeks. And that's exciting before you get a break, and then you got Summer League, and then you get a long break. Olympics coming up. The White Pal, Canada, Luka. Is he going to try to make the Olympics with Slovenia? He obviously will.
Yeah.
But other teams. Josh Green. Australia. Dante. I mean, it's going to be exciting times. This offseason is going to be exciting times. So we appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. We really appreciate y'all, and follow us on social. Thanks for for tuning in to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast.